Hello and welcome to Series 3 of Let's Go Further, a podcast from the Skills and Education group that challenges the way we think about skills and education. I'm your host Joe McLaughlin, and in this series we're discussing adult education and asking, is it as relevant today as it was more than 100 years ago when it was first established? In this episode, we're reflecting on the power of adult education to bring communities together, to reach out to those who might otherwise be left behind, and even to support people's health and well-being. Joining me are Dr. Sue Pember and Simon Parkinson. Sue is the Director of Policy and External Relationships at HOLEX, the leading professional membership body for adult community education and learning, while Simon is the CEO and General Secretary of the Workers' Educational Association, a charity that has been empowering adults across England and Scotland by bringing teaching to local communities for the last 120 years. So I'd like to start with some quite striking figures from work produced by your respective organisations. 90% of the UK workforce will need to reskill by 2030 in some capacity, and over 7 million adults do not have a GCSE equivalent qualification. Simon, do we have a bit of a crisis on our hands?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I think those figures are pulled together from across the sector, government and business, so they're not just the WEA figures. Crisis, yes, alongside a cost of living crisis, probably a crisis around economic inactivity with people not returning to the workforce, but also an opportunity because those numbers are well understood. So actually, we know from our work with adults that, the vast majority of adults with the right support want to reskill, look forward to reskilling and have got that aspiration to progress at work. So there's a real opportunity there as well. I think where there is another crisis looming for us, and I think this may have been exacerbated by the PM's speech yesterday, is in retaining and attracting a adult community education workforce. It's, the funding for adult community education compared to the funding for schools and colleges is a real issue for us at the moment. So a big job to do, but actually I always remain glass half full and we'll just carry on. We've been doing it for 120 years, so we'll carry on for the next 120.
So just picking up there, Simon, that was the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's speech to close out the Conservative conference, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, some big announcements around advanced British standards. We need to understand that, but also some big announcements about financial incentives for college lecturers and for school teachers, and that comes on the back of an increase for college lecturers and school teachers of 6.5% earlier in the summer. If you're a tutoring and adult community education provider, public sector provider like the WEA, so same legal status as colleges, we got 0%. And it's not clear yet whether the £30,000 bonus will also be available to adult community educators. So we'll work with government. I've got a lot of respect for DfE, for Robert Halfon, Gillian Keegan. We'll work with them. Hopefully it's just a little bit of an oversight and we can smooth that out.
And Sue, so in other episodes this year, we've spoken about the economic drag and the financial challenges that are caused by the skills gap, caused by this kind of need to reskill and retrain. Just putting them to one side for the moment, what other effects does the kind of need to reskill and the awareness of a lack of skills have on individuals?
Yeah, it has a sort of double or treble whammy on individuals. So if they're already in a low-paid, low-skilled job, it's very difficult to get out of that unless they are reskilled. So there's a role for employers and it's a role for the individuals. And in this country, we are at the middle of the tables on productivity. We don't do well against the other G7 nations. And mainly, it can be shown that we have a nation of people, many, as you've just said about the stats, have got poor literacy, poor numeracy skills. And now that those same people have got poor digital skills, they will be frightened to death about artificial intelligence and what's that going to do to their jobs. So the point that Simon and I are making really is that if we want to be pulling our weight in the world and increasing productivity and increasing people's well-being, we have to do something about the skills of the nation. And it is a crisis point because technology is moving fast. Jobs are changing. Nobody's probably job is that safe because of artificial intelligence, and people are beginning to worry about it. So we need to be doing something now.
So in that context then, Sue, what can adult education offer specifically? And I'd like first yourself and then Simon to come in with some examples from your work, kind of some positives that you've seen.
I'm a representative of adult education, so I'm bound to be absolutely positive. But they are fantastic. You know, there's 15,000 at least staff in the system in the adult community education world. They work out of 10,000 settings, and they educate, you know, around 500,000 adults annually. And even through COVID, they kept on going by turning themselves into online providers. And what do they do? Well, as we speak now, they will be out there in the community working with people to improve their language skills, their literacy and numeracy. Through the new Multiply Maths initiative, they'll be helping adults to improve their maths. They will be doing employability courses and working with DWP. And there is something for everybody. And the other side of that, so though over the last 10 years, many have shifted their provision into like employability or doing best in the workplace, they're also there for your personal well-being. And we often see people, you know, in a crisis, whether it's because of health or because of divorce or bereavement, they will turn to adult ed to help them get through it. And you again see in nearly every community some sort of provision that brings people together, which increases integration and supports people's well-being. You know, we're also collectively, even in Ofsted terms, you know, 96% are good or outstanding. We're the best sector, and we need more investment because we need to be doing more of this.
I think Sue's right. She's clearly passionate about it and is a real strong advocate for the sector. I'll give you some examples from our work, Joe. Sue's right. There's something for everybody at the WEA. We try not to turn anybody away. So all of those cultural programs, which we know improve health and well-being, our learners tell us that they, on average, visit their GP one time a year less, which saves the NHS £1.6 million just from WEA provision. But I'll give you a real example about employability, as Sue mentioned, because it's sometimes forgotten that adult community education plays a real vital role here. We worked with the Bilstein Group, a big automotive employer in the East Midlands. They were doing health and safety briefings and thought that their multinational workforce, some of them weren't quite understanding the sort of technical language of those health and safety briefings. So it started off as a real employability course. What happened and what they tell us happened is not only the impact on health and safety and productivity, but the impact on culture in that workplace. You now had your national groups coming together at lunchtime, speaking in English to each other, you know, and really sort of combined into a team ethic. And then what we also heard from one of our learners was it was the first time she'd felt confident enough to speak to the other mums at the school gate. So actually, she'd taken those skills, which had started off as quite a narrow, let's just make sure that we're keeping people safe at work, and went on to have, you know, massive community effects. And they are not isolated examples. There are, every provider across the sector could give you thousands of examples because that's happening on a daily basis.
So recognizing those different effects then and how they ripple out and one affects the other and it keeps growing and growing, I'm just wondering, is there something in particular about how adult education works that brings these benefits to the fore?
Yeah, and Sue's right. It was a real challenge through COVID. You know, for 117 years, our model has been hyper-local in community venues that people know and trust with other people that they know and trust. And then for 2 years, we were an online provider. And now with this 120-year-old weird hybrid startup organisation almost. But what was common across both of those learning methods and now the hybrid method is small group sizes so that people can learn with each other. So this isn't necessarily just about individual learning. This is small class sizes, learning with each other with an inspirational tutor, you know, at the front of the class that isn't chalk and talk, isn't trying to be just the expert in the room. Clearly, they've got their subject matter expertise. But that way of facilitating group conversations, that way of supporting adult learners, I think is distinct. I think, you know, those small class sizes in groups, increasingly back in venues that people know and trust is important because it is a massive step for a 25-year-old returning to education, maybe after a 5 to 10 year gap, they're not just going to go straight to the big shiny college in the centre of town. They want to cut their teeth somewhere that's a little bit closer to home, a little bit safer possibly as they view it in terms of their own sort of confidence levels, and then progress from there. So I don't know, Sue, is that you've seen this for years and years?
That's a good description of the sector. However, there are different parts of the sector. So we do, in adult community education, we do some level 4, and the class sizes would be similar to those that you would get in college or even a university. So we do a whole range of activity, and we do vocational work as well. But the big difference is, when we looked at this a few years ago, is that the teachers are normally qualified teachers, which is important, plus they have often a degree in their own discipline. So they're experts in the room. However, they're working with adults, and they really respect that. And like Simon said, being in a group with adults, you want the other adults to talk about their experience and bring that into the learning. And that's why they do so well in Ofsted. They know what their intent is. They know why they deliver, and they do know where their students score. And that's why, like I said, 96% of the learning organisations are good or outstanding. But as Simon really said, it is about the teacher in the classroom. Whenever we've done any feedback is that, I love my teacher, I get on really well, my teacher really respects me, my teacher understands what I need. And it's that good feel. And if you ever get a chance to go into an adult ed class, you will come out with a smile on your face. I think as a sector, they really are special. We would love them to get more in the limelight, that announcements were about the adult ed sector. That would be fantastic in the future.
So just picking up there, Sue, on what you've said about limelight, in different pieces of yours that I've read to kind of prepare for today, you've talked about adult education operating below the policy radar, just sort of chugging along and no one can see it. Hearing the positives that you've discussed and all the different ways that it benefits people and the effectiveness of its methods, how do we counter that? How do we get above the policy radar? How do we get spotted? And then also, how do we improve funding levels, do you think?
Being under the policy radar isn't a bad thing. Because of having one policy written in 2012, constant for 10 years, made learning organisations know what they had to deliver and how they delivered it, allowed Ofsted to inspect to a framework, knowing what should be expected by those learning organisations. And I think that's one of the reasons that they've done well, is because they have managed to keep to the policy, like I said, written in 2012, which they were part of developing, and then taking it through, sustaining it and improving it year in, year out. It's only last year that they had a change of policy, which is coming in this year. And we now need to make sure that quality doesn't drop because of that change and the different directives that government want adult education to do. But what I do think we need to make more people understand is that this is a really good value for money sector. It offers good quality. It does what local residents want. And those local residents are voters. It does what voters want. They think favourably of it. I mean, this sector also got the best employer award from businesses. So, sometimes I can't work out why it's not seen as that perfect educational system. And in fact, Robert Halfon, when he was the select committee, called adult and community education the jewel in the education crown. And I think we should be reminding him of that, Simon, every time we meet him.
We all know, the real positive benefits that it creates, not just around skills and employability, but combating isolation and loneliness, improving mental health and well-being. Not only are we valued for money, but increasingly, as operating costs are going up, and as funding staying flat, as a charitable provider, we're having to use some of our own charity reserves to make, to hold the quality to where we want it to be. And that can't be right. That can't be right that, we're relying on charitable reserves to educate adults in 2023. It's where we started 120 years ago. I'm desperate that we don't go all the way back to having to do it through charitable activity. So, we'll see where we get to.
We are heading into an election year. How would you both make the case to policymakers then that adult education is the jewel in the crown, that it does deserve a bit more polish or a bit more attention?
I think we're realistic enough to know that there's no magic money tree. So actually, as Sue said, in her previous answer, giving us some stability, actually just keeping that stability in the system, even if there's not, oodles more money, but actually stability and flexibility for us to really deliver the type of provision that we understand makes the biggest impact, the biggest difference to people, and to keep it wider than a very narrow technical, level 3 and above education offer. So if we can hold on to the diversity of provision, if either party or both parties can, give us a period, an extended period of stability, and actually just trust us to get on and deliver, in the way that we've successfully been doing over the, many, many, many years, then actually I think we can help them with the policy agenda, which is reskilling, and upskilling, our adults. We know how to do it. We're good at it, as Sue said, on all measures. We're good at it, regulation measures, employer measures, staff surveys. We know how to do this. So support us by giving us the confidence, freedom, and space to do what we're good at.
Well, what we haven't talked about much yet at the moment is devolution. So, there's 9 areas of the country that have got elected mayors. And if you look at the Greater London Authority, you'll see that the London mayor has got an amazing skills strategy, which they consult about and transparent about. And they have found ways to put money into adult and community education, not originally, but once you see it and feel it and you can see what it does for the community, you realise that you can probably get sort of more for your pound if you actually invest in adult and community education. And we're also seeing that, in Liverpool and in Bristol, and we're seeing changes in the West Midlands, where these mayors and their staff are working very much with the learning organisations to provide for the learner. I feel quite confident that, all 3 parties do understand adult and community education. But the issue that we got at the moment is, yes, we do get funding from DFE, but we have to be clever in sourcing funding from other departments as well. And what, we would have loved is a lifelong learning strategy across government that brought these different funding mechanisms together. So what we have a plea for is some sort of stability, at least a 3-year window of funding, so we know where we are, and a lifelong learning strategy that brings all the bits of government together that are funding post-19 skills into a coherent strategy.
Listening to what you're saying and trying to get away from the politics or explicit policies, it seems that you're pitching adult educators in a mixed role as educator, social support, would-be health worker. And I'm curious what the ideal skill set for an adult educator would be.
There's obviously that subject matter expertise and that qualification in your chosen field, which is important. These are qualified teachers. Also, though, it's ironic, really, because it's not just us that say this. People like the Confederation of British Industries, the CBI, say that the skills needed for the world of work going forward aren't so much the technical skills, but their communication skills, empathy, resilience, teamwork. And actually, as you said, that rounded skill set, they used to be wrongly labelled soft skills. These are essential skills. And actually we need those, and we have them in abundance in our tutor workforce as well. The other thing is that they are, rooted in their communities. We are not helicopter providers. We don't just, fly in, deliver for 2 years, fly out again. These are community educators in and of their own communities. So there's a trust, there's an understanding, there's a bond, and Sue's right. Whenever we ask our learners, all of the praise goes to the tutors, understandably and rightly. And my job as a CEO is to stay as far out of the way of that as possible, and just really support the tutors and the learners to have that experience. So it is a fantastic thing to see, and they are highly skilled individuals, and that's why we get so, I guess, disappointed and frustrated when we don't feel they're rewarded and recognised the same as other professional colleagues in public sector education, like college lecturers and school teachers. So just asking for parity, just asking, for people to recognise, just how, skilled and passionate, this adult, community workforce is.
The being in the community is incredibly important to their success, but so is the heads of service and leaders like Simon. So if you're a head of service working out of a local authority, you are working with other services like those who are caring for vulnerable families, those who are managing housing, those who are looking at the care industry and the care workers in that area. So they're very much within the mix of what is needed for that particular geographical patch. And therefore that then feeds down into their tutors. So their tutors, know where to feed people onto. So you're absolutely right. A tutor in an adult ed class often will have an adult staying behind after the class saying, I really struggle today with getting here. I've got this problem. And the adult ed teacher will know where to direct them to. Either they will signpost them to somebody within the service themselves, or, to citizens' advice, or within the local authority, their home local authority.
Simon, the WEA's impact report for 2022 put your mission as quote, fighting inequality and promoting social justice. And in our first episode, Professor John Holford of the University of Nottingham said in a similar vein, one of the roles of adult education is that it brings community together and it kind of improves and helps nurture democracy. Given all the challenges that we're seeing in the country at the moment, whether it's austerity policies or the fallout from Brexit or the comeback from COVID, what do you see as the role of adult education in kind of holding communities together and establishing that social contract in the 21st century, in the next, 10, 20, 50 years?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, Joe. And, know John Holford and the work of the Centenary Commission really well. We were part of that work. And that remains our mission. We do believe that the power of adult community education to build communities, it is a social justice and fighting inequality issue. Sue mentioned Multiply earlier, which is a government-funded programme to improve numeracy for adults. So don't call it maths, don't go anywhere near calling it maths. The way we use that money across both England and Scotland is bringing groups of people together to learn how to cook on a budget. So answering some of those issues about rising food prices and how they understand, how to buy the right ingredients, what is a good buying decision, and then how to do that. We help people understand their gas and electric bills, so we improve their numeracy through real live and relevant pieces of work with them. So it's not theoretical, it's not just learning, certainly not just learning maths, it's actually, upskilling. And when you do that, in those small group settings that we were talking about, it has an immediate impact, particularly back now that we're in venue-based centres again. It brings those communities together. It might be the only touch point that they would have ever had with each other. And because of the nature of that learning, because of the enjoyment, because of the skill of those tutors again, they create those friendships, they create those bonds, which means they then go out together into their community and have a real impact. We see people taking their learning out of the classroom and immediately into the community and extending that reach to say, actually, I did this. It wasn't scary. It's a great group of people. Come across every part of the country. Anybody that's involved in adult community education, just gets that, understands that is core to what we do. It is building those communities, and it is helping people with the real inequalities that they face at the moment.
The community enhancement and development and integration is still very much part of the purpose of adult ed, and that's recognised in the new policy of DFE as it was in the old policy. And it is really important when you have a disaster, whether it was the Grenville fire or something like that. That does bring communities together. And one of the things that we found in that area was that they wanted to turn to adult education. They wanted their adult education centre to reopen quickly and to be there for them. And that happens, after, if we in my old world, for quite time ago now, but in Edmonton when there was the riots, these were just young men and women who were dissatisfied with life. Again, one of the solutions to that, not the solution, but one of the platforms there was to provide more adult education in that area so that they could see that it was another alternative. And if you think about when people do learn, they go with one purpose, but it ends up being for another purpose. And we've got lots of really good stories where, people have learned English because they wanted to get a job or be more effective in their job, but they end up feeling really more confident now to work with their own children, and they go to family learning, which brings families together, intergenerational learning, and then they end up not just being, on the school governing body, they end up tutoring themselves, and they end up, with jobs in the school. So there's always multi outcomes from an adult ed course, and they even surprise me that you can start something and end something somewhere else, but it's always fantastic.
If each of you could make one positive change to try and ensure that adult education is both lifelong and life-wide, what would it be?
This country absolutely needs a lifelong learning strategy that is all age, all levels and in all settings. So at the moment, we've got something called the lifelong learning entitlement, but it's just an entitlement to a loan, and it stops at 60. So it's really important that new initiatives are brought together under the banner of lifelong learning, and we have a definition that we all like. And why would that make a difference on the ground? Because I think it would bring people together, it would galvanize, it would form a form of crusade that people could sign themselves up for, and everybody in the sector that is involved in adult education and those in DWP and health would understand how we're all working together so that the learner gets a much better experience, much more relevant to their life, and isn't having to fight bureaucracy about attending classes, or the health authority hasn't have to worry about doing social prescribing because it's seen as part of a national strategy.
I think Sue's right about the need for a national strategy, but we need to underpin it with, and it's a challenge for all of us, the sector, government, business, communities, trade unions that would have a big role to play in this, is how do we create a culture in the country that says that education doesn't stop at 19 or 21, when you finished school or university? How do we create that culture that says, actually, I'm going to be a lifelong learner. I can feel the benefits of that for myself individually. And actually, I can see the positive impact it has on people around me, be those my family members or my community members. How do I would build, if that one magic wish, I would build a culture in this country that values lifelong learning as a fundamental human right and almost a responsibility to ourselves and to those around us to say, I'm going to carry on learning and I'm going to do something really positive with that learning for my friends, families and communities. So I'd do that, Joe, if I had a magic wand. I'd build that culture of lifelong learning.
Thank you to my guests, Dr. Sue Pember and Simon Parkinson, and to you for listening. We hope you enjoyed the conversation and that it's got you thinking about adult education, its potential to change lives, and in turn, the opportunities for us to make it work better for individuals and society. If you have a question for us or a comment on what you've heard, please join in the conversation on social media, and remember to subscribe wherever you receive your podcast to access earlier and forthcoming episodes of Let's Go Further.